Hi, and welcome back to the Freedom Law Group Law Library. In this video, we're talking about what the IRS refers to as frivolous tax arguments and their attempt to discredit the revocation of election process, even though the process is found in federal law at 26 U.S.C. subsection 6013 G4A. Before we get into it, if you haven't yet watched our videos on the topics of the revocation of election and jurisdiction, I highly recommend doing that first. These videos lay the foundation for how and why the revocation of election process works, and why it's 100% safe, lawful, and effective. In short, once you complete a properly executed revocation of election affidavit and send it to the appropriate agencies and departments of the national government, the IRS loses jurisdiction. That means they can't lawfully pursue you for the tax year in which you sent your revocation of election, or for any future years. The IRS only has jurisdiction over statutory taxpayers. They have no jurisdiction over non-taxpayers, and this fact is confirmed in the 1922 case of Long v. Rasmussen, where the court said, quote, "The revenue laws are a code or system and regulation of tax assessment and collection. They relate to taxpayers, and not to non-taxpayers. The latter are without their scope. No procedure is prescribed for non-taxpayers, and no attempt is made to annul any of their rights and remedies in due course of law. With them, Congress does not assume to deal, and they are neither of the subject nor of the object of the revenue laws." Close quote. Once you complete the revocation of election process, you will have revoked the election you made to be a taxpayer in conjunction with your first filed 1040, which means you will no longer be a taxpayer. You're lawfully restored to your original non-taxpayer status, the same status you had before you signed a 1040 and elected into the federal income tax system. And yet, despite this clear legal remedy codified into law, every year the IRS will send a small fraction of revocation of election clients IRS Letter 3176C, or similar, in an effort to scare them back into voluntary compliance to tax laws that no longer apply to them as legal non-taxpayers. This letter is based upon an IRS publication titled, "The Truth About Frivolous Tax Arguments." It's a 62-page PDF and can also be found online. In IRS Letter 3176C, the IRS accuses the revocation of election client of engaging in frivolous tax arguments. Here's the part that no one's talking about, and the part you need to pay attention to. In the first place, the letter is addressed to Dear Taxpayer. Yes, it was mailed to the name and address of the client, but that doesn't mean it's addressed to the client in their correct legal capacity. What matters is how the body of the letter begins, and it begins with, "Dear Taxpayer." You can accept their presumption that you are a taxpayer and respond as a taxpayer, submitting to them, doing what they say, and stepping right back under the national government's taxing jurisdiction. Or, you can recognize that they're not talking to you, and rebut their presumption. In addition, here's what we find so telling and undeniable proof and evidence that the revocation of election process is lawful. In the entire 62-page publication. In their letters. On their website. The IRS never once mentions the revocation of election process as frivolous. Not once. In fact, the term revocation of election doesn't even appear. Again, not once in 62 pages. Moreover, the citation 26 U.S.C. subsection 6013 G4A, the law that authorizes the revocation of election process, is completely absent. That is a massive and purposeful omission. Let me ask you something. If the revocation of election is, in fact, frivolous, why wouldn't the IRS just say so? Why not state clearly in an undeniable way, something like, quote, "Some Americans have submitted a revocation of election citing 26 U.S.C. subsection 6013 G4A. This is invalid. Americans cannot revoke their taxpayer status, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you." Close quote. Why not say that? Why not call it by name? Here's the answer. They don't say it, because they can't. They can't call it frivolous because it's not. It's a legal process, written in the tax code. 26 U.S.C. subsection 6013 G4A says it plainly, an election under this subsection shall terminate at the earliest of the following times, revocation by the taxpayer. It's not frivolous. It's not a loophole. It's not a theory. It's the law. And the IRS knows it. That's why they won't name the process. That's why they won't cite the statute. Because to do so, and to refer to it as a frivolous tax argument, would be a bold-faced lie. They know it and we know it, and they are just hoping that you don't. They just gaslight, threaten, and fearmonger. They hope that by accusing you of engaging in frivolous tax arguments, they can cause you to doubt this process and get you to start paying taxes again, when there is no law requiring you to do so. Now here's a bit of a mind bender for you. At Freedom Law Group, we don't dispute anything the IRS says in their publications. We agree with them completely. Every warning the IRS puts out is 100% accurate, including the frivolous tax arguments, if you're a statutory taxpayer. That's the key distinction. Everything the IRS says is true for taxpayers. But if you're not a taxpayer, if you've lawfully revoked your election as a taxpayer, none of it applies to you. Here's a perfect example. We say that filing a federal income tax return is voluntary, at least it was, the first time you did it. The IRS says, filing a federal income tax return is not voluntary. And believe it or not, we're both right. Freedom Law Group is right when we say it's voluntary. And the IRS is also right when they say it's not. How is that possible? Because the IRS is only talking to taxpayers. Just look at the letter. Again, it's addressed to Dear Taxpayer. They're not even talking to you as a legal non-taxpayer. But if you respond to that label and accept it, you just stepped right back under their jurisdiction. But if you've completed the revocation of election, you're no longer a taxpayer. And for non-taxpayers, paying federal income taxes and filing a federal income tax return is 100% voluntary. That's the bottom line. So yes, everything the IRS says in its letters and publications is true. But only for people who are legally classified as taxpayers. If you're not a taxpayer, none of it applies to you. They're not even talking to you. And that's why everyone should complete the revocation of election process and walk off the federal income tax plantation forever. If you're not yet a Freedom Law Group client and you've never completed the revocation of election, now's the time. Our tax freedom package includes a 25-page customized revocation of election affidavit. Also, step-by-step mailing instructions. In addition, we provide the proper tax forms to give your employer, if you are employed, that will stop all federal income tax withholding immediately, which means all that money is going to start landing in your bank account. And step-by-step instructions for filling out the forms correctly. And lifetime access to our private client resource center and 90 days of support if you need help along the way. You can get all the details and sign up at freedomlawgroup.us/row. And for our current or even future clients, if you ever do receive IRS Letter 3176C or similar, don't stress. We've already written a 13-page response letter that absolutely dismantles the IRS letter. It's available in your client resource center, and the letter is brilliant. It's brutal, factual, and legally devastating. And not a single one of our clients has received a follow-up letter from the IRS after sending it. The IRS goes silent. Because they know. So, if you're serious about correcting your status, protecting your income, and stepping out of the federal income tax system lawfully, the revocation of election is your remedy, and will guide you every step of the way. Again, visit freedomlawgroup.us to learn more or enroll. I've placed a direct link in the description below. Thank you for taking the time to expand your education on the truth about federal income taxes. Be sure to check out our channel for newly added videos.